Survival horror? Nah. Dino Crisis 2 throws that out the window and goes full-blown action. And you know what? It works. Bigger guns, more dinosaurs, and non-stop arcade-style combat make this sequel one of the best evolutions in Capcom history. But for me, this game isn't just a classic, it's a personal favorite. I first played Dino Crisis 2 while stationed in Pearl Harbor with the US Navy Seabees, and I still remember blasting through raptors at my Aunt Judy's house in Hawaii. So today, we're diving into why this game still holds up and why it might just be the best Dino Crisis ever. Aloha, my name is Mike, and I am a former US Navy Seabee. I'd like to welcome you to the Gaming Road Warrior channel, where we talk about retro games from the 80s, 90s, and 2000s. Today we're going to take a look at this awesome PS1 game from the early 2000s. In this episode, we'll dig into the development process, story, characters, and gameplay of Dino Crisis 2 to see if we can find an answer to that question. Also, we'll be taking a look at Fatal Frame 3 for the PlayStation 2 in the 2000s game break. Grab your shotgun and dino repellent because it's time to hit the road to the gaming wasteland. My battalion had just completed our deployment in Operation Task Force Falcon in Kosovo. After some much needed rest at our home port, I was selected for a detail in Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. At that time, I already owned a PlayStation 1 and had played Dino Crisis but never managed to beat it. The year was 2000 and I was thrilled to be deployed to Hawaii, my birth home. My father still lived there along with my stepmother, younger brother, and younger sister. Shortly after arriving, I was eager to pick up Dino Crisis 2 for the PlayStation 1. Right away, I noticed how vastly different it was from the first game. If Dino Crisis was like Alien, then Dino Crisis 2 was Aliens. More action-packed and intense. Aliens happens to be my favorite film in the franchise since I grew up watching it, and I even saw it in the theaters, unlike the original movie. I ended up playing and beating Dino Crisis 2 at my Aunt Judy's place in Oahu, Hawaii, and it was an unforgettable experience. I couldn't put the game down, but now, after all these years, I have to ask, does it still hold up? The graphics likely haven't aged well, and the tank controls might feel outdated. I'll be diving into that in my final thoughts at the end of this video. But before we get into all that, let's take a look at the history behind Dino Crisis 2 and how the sequel came to be. Released in North America on September 20th, 2000, Dino Crisis 2 is a more action-oriented survival horror game that builds on the features and mechanics of one of Capcom's most legendary franchises, Resident Evil. However, while it was successful upon its release, it's still remembered and loved by those of us who played it so many years ago. There hasn't been a new Dino Crisis game in more than 20 years. Why is that? As far as video game companies go, Capcom has been the cream of the crop for several decades. The Japanese game developer and publisher released one banger after another, with franchises like Mega Man, Street Fighter, and a ton of arcade games helping them thrive through the 80s and early to mid 90s. By the end of the decade, they were ready to unleash something new, something different, something scary. In 1996, Capcom introduced us to the world of Resident Evil. If you're wondering, Mike, what does Resident Evil have to do with Dino Crisis? They're two completely different games. Well, as it turns out, Dino Crisis has quite a lot to do with Resident Evil. In fact, Dino Crisis probably wouldn't even exist without it. Like Resident Evil, the concept for Dino Crisis came from the mind of Shinji Mikami. After creating and directing the development of Resident Evil 1, and then overseeing the development of Resident Evil 2 as a producer, Mikami and his team wanted to create a new game, one that had a similar style to Resident Evil but traded the horror and a funhouse vibe for a more real, thrilling kind of horror, like the kind you get from riding a roller coaster. Seriously, those are his words he used to describe the project. So, inspired by the 1997 film The Lost World, Jurassic Park, and the 1986 film Aliens, Shinji Mikami and his dev team at Capcom Production Studio 4 created Dino Crisis, a tense, terrifying survival horror game that used vicious dinosaurs to scare players instead of zombies. Shortly after its release on July 1st, 1999, it was clear that the game was a hit. It received great reviews and went on to sell about 2.4 million copies on the PS1 worldwide. With yet another massive hit on their hands, Capcom wanted to get a sequel rolling immediately. However, due to changes at Capcom, the new project's development would go quite differently. Shortly after Dino Crisis 1's launch in 1999, Capcom went through an internal shakeup that resulted in Shinji Mikami being put in a more prominent role within the company, executive producer of Production Studio 4. With all of his new responsibilities, he wasn't able to actively work on yet another sequel to a franchise he started. So like with Resident Evil 2, he was forced to step back and hand the keys to the development to a new team and a new director while he played a much smaller role in the creation. Hiroyuki Kobayashi served as a planner on the first game and was hired for the development as the sequel's producer. Noboru Sugimura was responsible for rewriting the Resident Evil 2 script, and he was assigned the role of head writer. Shu Takumi, who is credited with directing the first half of Dino Crisis 1, while Mikami worked on Resident Evil 2, was brought on to direct all of Dino Crisis 2. According to Takumi, a total of 50 people, including these three primary devs, worked on Dino Crisis 2, a game that turned out to be very, very different from the first. In the Prima official strategy guide, game planner Hiroyuki Kobayashi said that this was their actual goal, and that it isn't all that interesting just killing dinosaurs, so we wondered, how could we make it more fun? Their answer to that question was a sequel that changed and added a ton of things to feel more like an action movie than a horror movie. The devs made the game faster, added a point system that rewards aggressive gameplay, and added several sub-weapons to mix up the action along with a ton of varied gameplay sequences that we're going to talk about later in the video. They also traded in the cold, cramped, fully 3D rendered hallways of the first game for bright, sunny outdoor environments, brought to life with a 2D pre-rendered backgrounds. Similar to classic Resident Evil games, this style of presentation freed up the limited PlayStation 1 horsepower for more dinosaurs on screen that looked, moved, and sounded better than he did in the first game. Like Resident Evil 2, Dino Crisis 2 also features two protagonists that the player switches between over the course of the game. Despite the huge change in direction, Dino Crisis 2 actually came together very quickly. Development started sometime in the late 1999 after the first game was released, and it hit store shelves on September 20th, 2000 in North America. That means it was only in development for just over a year. Despite the short development cycle, Dino Crisis 2 was still a massive success. It also received great reviews and sold 1.2 million copies worldwide on the PS1. So now that we know how the game was made, let's switch gears and talk about the game itself. Dino Crisis 2 stars Regina, the protagonist of the first game, and a new character called Dylan Morton. Regina is a member of a Black Ops Special Forces unit called SORT, which stands for Secret Operations Raid Team, while Dylan is a member of a different acronym agency called TRAT, Tactical Reconnaissance and Acquisition Team. Man, Capcom really loves terrible acronyms. The story of the game picks up after the first game and the discovery of the third energy tech, something that was supposed to help humanity by being a clean, infinite energy source. but ended up causing rifts in space-time that brought back dinosaurs instead. Go figure. One of those rifts resulted in the disappearance of an entire town called Edward City and the surrounding area. So Trat is sent in through the time gate to investigate the situation, save the 1,300 people who disappeared, and collect any data they can find about the Third Energy Project. It's a mission that would be a piece of cake without all the damn dinosaurs, which is why Regina is sent along with Trat as an advisor. There aren't too many other people who have experience fighting dinosaurs. The rest of them died in the first game. While facing tons of dinosaurs like velociraptors, T-Rexes, Allosaurus, Triceratops, and plenty of others, Regina and Dylan discover secrets that are way above their pay grade. I won't spoil it because it's worth experiencing for yourself if you like that kind of story. So if words like alternate timelines, human extinction, Noah's Ark, and orbital lasers generate any interest, you should probably check out Dino Crisis 2. Like I said earlier, Dino Crisis 2's gameplay is way different than the first game. Dino Crisis 1 was slow and methodical with only a few weapons and limited ammo, while Dino Crisis 2 is fast, has tons of weapons, and plenty of ammo. The dev team knew you'd want to shoot the dinos, so they gave you plenty of different ways to shoot them. Many times. Aside from your standard weapons like handguns, shotguns, and machetes, Dino Crisis 2 has some wacky stuff like the firewall, which is exactly what it sounds like, and a solid cannon, which shoots lightning bolts. Both Regina and Dylan have different sets of weapons, so switching characters also makes you play the game pretty differently. The game uses tank controls for character movement, which takes some time getting used to after playing modern games, but works fine for the most part. It makes it more difficult to move, aim, and shoot, but that's just part of the game's design. Thankfully, you don't have to use these tank controls all the time since DC2 has some awesome on-rails gameplay segments that change up the experience, like a Triceratops chase where you shoot a turret on the back of a speeding truck, or a Seabound escape where you use mounted heavy artillery to take down pterodactyls and plesiosaurus. These sections are a lot of fun, and feel like they've placed in the perfect spots to break up the game and keep things moving. Whenever you kill some dinos, you earn extinction points, which can be used to unlock weapons, upgrade armor, and buy health items and ammo. I think this is a great system since it makes sure you never run out of ammo, but it does make the game way easier. There are also puzzles in this game, but they're just fine. They kind of feel like they're there to slow you down a lot of the time, rather than being something fun to do. The game really shines when you're shooting dinosaurs. Now let's talk about Dino Crisis 2's pros and cons. The arcade action style of gameplay is extremely fun. Lots of great weapons. Every dinosaur has unique design and realistic movement. Varied gameplay segments keep the game feeling fresh. The story's cool, but it's also kind of silly. Tank controls made sense when the game came out, but they take some getting used to now. Puzzles are meh. The game is pretty short at just around 5 hours long.
2000's Game Break.
Fatal Frame 3, The Tormented for the PlayStation 2 is a survival horror game that blends psychological horror with the supernatural elements. The story follows Rei Kurosawa, a photographer who becomes haunted by strange dreams involving a mansion and a mysterious woman. After the tragic death of her fiancé, Rei begins experiencing more disturbing visions, eventually discovering that the mansion in her dreams is tied to a deadly curse and a series of tragic deaths. As she investigates, Rei finds herself trapped in a twisted reality where the line between the living and the dead blurs. Players used a camera obscura, a special camera that can capture and banish spirits, to solve puzzles, uncover the dark history of the mansion, and face terrifying ghosts that haunt her every step. Along with Rei, players also control two other characters, Mio and Kei, who are linked to the mansion's curse. The game is rich in atmosphere, offering a slow building sense of dread, and its story intertwines the past and present to unravel the mystery behind the hauntings. With haunting visuals, intense combat, and a gripping narrative, Fatal Frame 3 delivers a chilling and immersive experience that keeps players on edge as they uncover the secrets of the tormented souls that plague the mansion. With all of that said, is Dino Crisis 2 still worth playing today? Yes, I think so. Initially, I wasn't a fan of the graphics when I played it, again recently. However, after spending some time with the game, I fell back in love with it. I just had to get past how the graphics look on an LCD screen. If I were you, I'd play it on a CRT TV for a better experience. The graphics really shine on those old TVs, perfectly capturing the nostalgia of playing it back in the day. Now, about the tank controls. Oh man, it took me a little while to get used to them again, but you know what? They still feel good to me. I had no trouble blasting away dinosaurs, though I did have a few moments where I ran in the wrong direction. But once I got the hang of it again, navigating the game felt natural. So no, the tank controls aren't an issue for me anymore. If you played games with tank controls before, you should be fine. But if you've never experienced this control scheme, it could be frustrating at first. Overall, Dino Crisis 2 is an action-packed PS1 game that managed to do a lot despite the scope of the project and the hardware limitations it had to consider. The 2D pre-rendered backgrounds offer a lot more variety in the setting, taking you to colorful jungles and grungy facilities while looking great the entire time. The action is smooth and fast for the most part, and you really feel like you're in an action movie once you get a hang of the controls. It's not a perfect game, but I think it does enough things right, and at a high enough level of quality that I'm pretty confident in calling Dino Crisis 2 a PS1 classic alongside Resident Evil. That brings me to my next point. With the Dino Crisis games having so much in common with Resident Evil and having so many fans, why haven't they gotten the same remake treatment? Can you imagine what it would be like to explore these jungles, bases, and Edward City while blasting away at dinos with high-end graphics and overhauled gameplay mechanics? I think it would be awesome, and I hope that if there isn't a Dino Crisis remake in the works already, that Capcom starts working on that soon. In the meantime, Capcom and GOG have brought the first two Dino Crisis games to the PC with refreshed and improved versions. I think if you haven't played either of these games yet, they're definitely worth trying out. And that wraps up this look at Dino Crisis 2. What do you think? Does it deserve a AAA remake like the Resident Evil games? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Take care and remember, gaming is your road to adventure.